right, before we get started today, I want to talk to you a little bit about the safety equipment you're going to need when you have to remove some runs or some dust nibs out of a freshly painted car, vehicle, whatever you've painted. So first of all, you're probably going to need some latex gloves, and you probably want a dust mask. But first of all, when we get a paint job and we're trying so hard to get it nice and shiny, you know, and there's that fine line where you're spraying and oh, it's going down beautifully, and then all of a sudden, we get a run. Or maybe we're in an environment that's not perfectly clean, like a paint booth, and we get a little dust or dirt or nibs in it. Rather than start all over, we want to try and salvage that because paint costs a lot of money. So, what I'm going to show you today is removing a few dust nibs, maybe a run or two. The first method you can use is a little pumice stone, and these come in specific grits. For instance, this one, it says 1000 on the grit, but I've been soaking this particular pumice stone. It's color-coded. This one is kind of a yellowish green. This one is a 1500 grit block. It's been soaking for probably a couple of hours. If you're not using it very often, take it back out of the water and just let it dry. The surface of this pumice block could be contoured if I need it to. I could sand this pumice block until that exactly matches the surface that I'm sanding. But today I'm going to show you another technique that's less expensive. What you're going to need for this for your paint nib removal, your dust nib removal, or your run removal is just a regular old razor blade. You're also going to want 2000 to 1500 grit paper. So let's get started. I peel off the protective coating, and now if you look at this razor blade, on the tip, on the sharp end, it's just pointing straight up, right? And I've got on each side a corner that could easily gouge the paint. So I've got to make sure that I take down these corners, and then I also want to be sure, instead of being straight up, I'm going to curl the edge, that tip, the very tip of that blade. And I got to remember which way I curved it, so that when I come back and start sanding on it, I can take that curve and just start scraping across it at a 90-degree angle and start pulling off the excess clear of the run. So we've got to go over to a flat piece of glass, and we need to put the angle on this razor blade. We got to make sure we got 2000 grit paper and a flat piece of glass, which right here is good. Any flat piece of glass will work. I just want to make sure I don't have anything behind the glass, so any chips or anything like that could create a problem on my razor blade when I go to sharpen it and turn that blade, turn the edge. So first thing, I've got it nice and flat now. I'm going to take and go back and forth on this corner just to take off that corner right there. And I'm going to do it to both sides of the blade, all right? Just taking down that corner so I don't get a gouge. You can see that that has come down a little bit. I'm going to do the same over here. Now when I look at it, yeah, it's down. They're both down, that's good. Now I'm ready to start to turn that blade. I'm going to curl it. I'm going to curl the end of that blade like this. Okay? So I'm just going to drag it across in one direction. Be sure that I hold the thick part of the razor blade, not down into the thin part. Otherwise, I will only turn the center portion of the razor blade. I want to turn the whole thing. So just drag it across at about a 45-degree angle. And do that 4, 5, 6 times. And I can come back anytime if this starts to get dull on me when I'm scratching off the run or the nib. Okay, I think we're probably ready. You may even want to mark it so that you know that you're sanding on the right side. So I'm just going to put a little mark on it with my Sharpie. When we're talking about runs, we've got to be very careful in knowing when we can go ahead and start fixing that run. If we can still get a nail print when we push fairly hardly on this, and the nail print stays in it, it's not springing back up, kind of like Jell-O, we probably want to let it set for a little bit. But if we can push in and get a nail print, but the nail print springs back up out of there, you're probably pretty good to go ahead now where you could use the razor blade technique to remove this run. It's critical that you wait the right amount of time. So now I look at my razor blade, I marked it because I've already sharpened it, I marked the side that's curled, and if I were to look at it, the blade would be curled like this, okay? So now I'm going to grab a hold of that. I'm going to go on a 90-degree angle. I'm just going to start scraping it. I'll get a lot of white residue. And I want to be sure and scrape just on the top so that I'm just taking the excess clear off of there. Now if you look, I've got some of that clear residue. That's what you're after. if I see that I'm starting to cut on one side more than the other, I've got to make sure I don't start gouging into the side here on either side of it. And I go at this at a couple different directions all the time. I never stay in one particular spot. I do long strokes. When I get to the real heavy spot, I'll do short strokes just over the tip of the run. I'm getting close up here. If you look, you can see that on the one side, when I drag my razor blade across it, it's all dull on this one side, but on the other side, I still have a little bit of shiny right next to the sag or run, which means I'm not quite down far enough, but I'm getting close because the other side is touching, okay? So now I'm going to start dragging from this side and pull up. As I'm still pulling white, I know I'm still okay. We do need a certain amount of clear protection to give us UV ray protection, and so I'm going to stop right here. That one's done. I'm going to come down here on these runs now and concentrate on those. So, at any time, if I notice a change in color, that means I've cut through all the way on the clear and I'm down into the base coat. And I've just messed it up, man. I got to start all over. So we're okay thus far. Let's carry on. I'm going to come over here. Pumice block, you don't have as good as a visual as you do when you're using the razor blade. So I'd like to show you a little bit about the pumice block. And so I'm going to come on here now, and I have to use it wet. If you look, that pumice is actually rocking back and forth on the top of that run. So that run's fairly thick. So I got to be sure that I just keep it with the feel of my hand, just keep it on the top of that run. And I'm getting pretty close. I'm going to take another visual. I'm getting concerned now that because I can't quite feel what's going on, I'm going to go back to the razor blade. Yeah, beautiful. I'm going to hit it with this real quick over the whole thing, and then I'll finish up sanding with some 2000 grit paper. And all this is doing is this is removing my gouges or scratches I put in with my razor blade. Now I'm going to sand it with this piece of wet sandpaper, this 2000 grit, that I actually use to sharpen my blade. I'm going to fold it in thirds after I've cut it in half like this, soak it a little bit, then we're going to start sanding. I'm going to make sure that my panel stays wet as I do it, make sure it stays lubricated, and I'm just going to move back and forth across. Now that we've sanded this down with 2000 grit, I think we're about ready for some polishing compound and bring this shine back up out. We're going to now go ahead and get our polisher out and use some compound. We want to start with compound. That's the coarsest of the three. You want to just be sure that you're doing the coarsest process first and then working your way to the next finer process and the most fine process so that the scratch gets smaller and smaller. First thing I want to do is get my polisher out. I've got a foam pad here. I probably need to clean it. I'm using a regular screwdriver. I'm just going to run it across it as I turn it on and get rid of some of this compound that's dried up on here. So now I'm going to reach for my coarsest material. I'm just going to put some on the pad here. Kind of go around in a circle on this. I'll turn it on slowly so that I don't sling the compound all over myself. Wherever you're working, you could actually sling it quite a ways. So you want to be careful when you do this. And just turn it on nice and slow. Get going. There we go. And I'm just moving it back and forth. Nice and easy. A little bit of pressure on it, not a lot. Around 1500 RPM is just right. All right. I'm going to wipe away any of that compound with a nice clean rag. I don't want to use a dirty rag or anything else. I'm going to wipe away that compound on this, any that's left over. And actually, that's pretty shiny right there. I'm going to go to the mid-grade, so I'm going to swap out my pad. The pad density is made to match the particular compound or glaze. I'm going to put a little bit of compound here, or polish, I'm sorry, it's polish we're using at this point. And I'll start it up slow again. There we go, we're going to rub it around a little bit. Once I get it smeared around, then I'm going to go ahead, turn the polisher up, push. Try to keep your polisher flat so it doesn't grab. You don't want to go up on the edge like this. That's no good. That looks really good. We could go one more finish glaze, It has its separate pad and the separate polish so that we don't mix or intermingle the different compounds and polishes. But this is looking really good. It does help in aiding fill any tiny little scratch that might be there. So we'll go ahead and put it on. Don't try and do too much or your compound will dry out on you. And baby, it's actually shinier, I think, than the original paint job right next to it. That might be a problem for some customers. I'll just remove any of the dry sling that I've got here. And we're pretty much done. That's it. There you go. There you have it.